Oh no, is Major Arlene becoming a horse game channel? I mean, a bitch just might. But in any case, hey, hi, hello! I hope everybody has had a good holiday, and I also hope that everyone is cool with me deciding that the new year actually starts in February. We're covering a couple games today. The first and main reason for this video, Horses of Hoofprint Bay, which is developed by Thogly Studios and marketed by Alice Rupert of The Main Quest. Alice was kind enough to send me a demo of this game. It looks pretty cute, pretty fun, so I'm keen to have a look. The second, Equitania, was actually sent to me back in July, and I forgot. I'm really sorry to the dev. It got lost in my email, but I remembered like a couple days ago that I had that request. So I signed up for the Steam playtest to have a look at what was currently available for this game, which isn't much, but it is looking at least kind of interesting. So let's get started. By the way, guys, if you need a break from doom scrolling, I just ran across this fantastic little site called gradient.horse. You can draw a horse and you can add it and you can watch it run. I adore it. I love it. My horse is not great, but it exists, and there you go. So yeah, no, definitely go give it a shot and add to the horses. So, like I said, the main reason I made this video was to talk about Horses of Hoofprint Bay. From their Steam page, Horses of Hoofprint Bay is a lovingly hand-drawn 2D point-and-click barn build-up game. Take care of your horses, train them to build up their strength and confidence, and compete for prize money. Breed adorable foals, hire and manage staff, and build the stable of your dreams. So basically, this is a rescue the farm type of situation, only we don't get a story to go with it, just a piece of land with a lot of trash and a rickety stable. Which, I know how negative that sounds, but that's honestly the best kind of way to start your own original characters. You can make up a backstory, make them look the way you like, and then make up a story for them. So, all good there. I'm actually not going to complain about the way the game starts. The problem is going to be holding a person's interest. Stable management is a tricky thing to sell, mostly because it's a lot of grind, so there needs to be a hook or a sense of progression. This comes in the form of buying and upgrading parts of your land and buildings, competing, breeding, boarding horses at your stable, and giving lessons. I actually thought the lesson mechanic was kind of interesting. It's the first time I've seen a horse game do this. And I gotta say, spot on for the English riding discipline, although that's coming from a hunter jumper that never went past the 2-foot jumping classes, so take that with a grain of salt. Also, really quick before I get into more of the meat of things in this game, I just wanted to give a shout out to the art style, the music, and the sound. They are all extremely cute. I really liked them. And at the risk of maybe pitting two games against each other, this game feels quite a bit like Ranch of Rivershine, with the discipline being more definitively English in Hoofprint Bay. And Hoofprint Bay is more specifically focused on stable management. Check out that line graph. So I played about 2 hours on my first session, and I can't lie, I struggled really hard with the jumping distances. Every horse game does it differently, as you'll see in a second, and I just wish the genre could collectively decide to at least mark those distances by default. For those of you who are versed in horse jumping, the way that we do this in real life is by counting strides, as we don't get the benefit of a HUD indicator attached to our helmets. Unfortunately, because this is a video game, counting strides is not a reliable way of memorizing courses either, so we just kinda have to guess. And that's a real shame, because this game progresses a lot by winning competitions, so if you're not skilled enough to keep up, it'll be difficult to progress without other income streams, and goals are necessary to understand the game's version of mechanics. This was not helped by the fact that the horses indeed actually have personalities and don't just always do what you tell them. And I actually do have to give the game flowers for this, because I think there's basically no other game I've played that really implements this meaningfully, other than refusing jumps if you approach them at the wrong angle. But it can mean that while you're trying to figure out distances on jumps, you may nearly get dumped. It's like my lesson days riding this fuck-ass Shetland cross named Chessie, who'd either balk at the slightest position shift, or just attempt to buck you off. Which is not a fond memory. I'm pretty sure she's actually part of the reason that my blood pressure has issues now. But anyways,
once I started my second session, I had to look at the settings, and there is actually a little jump indicator, which are just little cones. Nice. And I think a good way to call attention to this is if a player fails a course for like the second time or something, be like, hey, there's a setting for this. Go check it out. You could just have it like in a tooltip in the corner or something like that. And there's also an auto jump feature, which is an accessibility feature, but it also does just make show jumping training a lot less grindy. Outside of the confidence meter, the boarding, and the lessons, I don't think this game does all that much particularly different from other stable management sims. And I'm going to say this as a neutral statement, because I know there are people who would eat up the hell out of a stable management sim, and all of them come with some level of grind. They have to, otherwise the game would be like an hour long tops. And let's be real, the neurodivergents like myself who eat spreadsheets for breakfast would eat this up. All that said though, once you get the mechanics, it's the only sense of progression you really get is by completing tasks and milestones. This progression, it's taken me too long to realize, is basically the same way Legend of Komori does theirs. Breeding better horses to get to different goals, which is a fine enough mechanic, but I personally just cannot bring myself to like it. I think the problem that I have with both Hoofprint Bay and Legend of Komori is that they leave this implied rather than explicit with the way that they progress their quests. If you introduce this concept earlier, I think it will become a lot better understood and folded into the gameplay loop in a more natural way. I'd say even before you do the medium show jumping quest, introduce it as a, hey, if you're having trouble doing the shows, you may need a better horse. Or just introduce breeding as a concept. In hindsight, I think I never put 2 and 2 together because one of the formative horse games I played in my youth, Let's Ride Silver Buckle Stables, just gives you better horses as a reward once you finish a show circuit. And in Rival Stars Horse Racing, breeding is basically just as big a deal in the real life horse racing industry as well as the racing. Plus the concept is introduced very early on in the game that breeding is instrumental in progressing the story, hard-locking progression until you breed a better horse in many cases. I think you can have soft-locked progression, but you need to be pretty explicit that both training and breeding are the only way to progress the game in any meaningful way. Overall, I think Horses of Hoofprint Bay does a fine enough job of being a horse game. The art style is really pleasant. I can see this being appealing for a wide range of folks who are into stable management sim, and then other than a couple bugs I ran into, which, to be honest, is to be expected for a pre-release beta, this game is really solidly made. And hey, this is only the demo. It costs nothing for you to try it out and make your own decision, which is what I highly recommend you do. These people definitely know and love horses. There's a lot of little details I love. I just have a bit less patience for grind than most, I think.
Now, Equitania is marketed as a horse racing game focused on archery. So, essentially, this game requires you to be both fast and precise, 2 things I am decidedly not. But I wanted to give this a fair shot. Anyways, so I did. So the current playtest is about 30 minutes long, I think. I'm not really sure where the game is actually meant to end because by the end of it, I did the same race twice and the guy didn't move from his spot, so I assume I hit the end. If I didn't, please don't yell at me because it was very unclear. Which leads me to my first point. The tutorialization is not particularly clear. I'm sure it's partly because I didn't read the instructions, but I tend to argue that I don't want to particularly stop in the middle of a race to read instructions. You can pause the race a little to explain things, especially if it's like keybinds and stuff. I think that works pretty well for the first couple of times. I will say though, there is a good sense of escalation when introducing new concepts and skills. The first race is just racing, and running rather. Second race is jumping, third race I believe is shooting, and I think then there's a combination of all 3, if you don't combine them in the third race. I'm not particularly sure actually. The races themselves are not particularly suitable for a tutorial, I think. There's a lot of like really tight hairpin turns and awkward angles that don't always feel great to ride through and are problematic if precision is something that you're graded on. You obviously don't want to make it too easy, but some turns are just unrealistic for a horse to complete, like period, no matter how much you up your perk for riding control. There's also these extremely narrow bridges that have no railing collision, so you can kind of just fall off the edge of them. The horse animation also needs work, I think. I don't think I've seen a horse's butt move like that ever. The jumping is extremely awkward. It isn't fluid in the way that horses normally jump, instead sort of stopping, and it takes ages for the jump animation to finish. It definitely doesn't lend itself to racing. The story itself seems to be heading in an interesting direction. You're searching for your missing sister in this land. It's not entirely clear if this is where you've always been, or if it's something like a mind palace that you're virtually plugged into. I don't know. I think the title's menu dialogue explains this a bit, but that's a poor substitute for an in-game explanation, especially when the guide does fill you in on some lore as you race, although I'd ask that these explanations maybe get moved to non-tutorial races, because it becomes extremely hard to focus on getting comfortable with the controls and taking in lore at the same time. You're also given chances to talk to your horse, but sometimes in the middle of races, which is a very weird place to put these, and it basically grinds time down to a halt. Also, I'm sorry, but I hate the way your horse talks. It's like Yoda, but even more grammatically incorrect. Everyone and everything else talks normally in this game, so please extend that to Silver. To be clear, I don't hate the content of the dialogue, just the way it's written. I think the actual dialogue is actually pretty good. I'm not exactly sure how bonding will progress the story. It's something that the dev makes a lot of reference to, but I'm not exactly sure how it works. Like, you do make choices when you say things, and I'm assuming maybe that has an effect on the story outcome, but I'm not exactly sure how you track that or what it does. However, there is this really great sequence with a demon talking to you, and there's these particles that take shape based on what he's referencing. Then you're asked to race to a crystal, a failsafe, which will reset your perk and race completion progress. So this indicates to me that there's a bit of a roguelike element to this, which does make it a bit more interesting as a game overall. Unfortunately, this only happens once as far as I can tell for the demo, so it's a bit hard to know what the final gameplay loop will look like, other than a lot of races. We also learn about beacons, which I'm not sure I understand how these work. The game insists on not having a map, which I think would be fine if the crystals like shot a light up if you were looking for one in particular that you wanted to improve, like for that race. What actually tends to happen is that you're led from one crystal to the next as you race, so you explore in a very linear fashion if you want to improve your skills. I'm sure there's other ways to explore, but this tends to lead you to be on trails, as a lot of the mountains and rivers are not actually traversable outside of those trails. In any case, I think there's something here with Equitania, but I would just need a bit more available to do to really be able to form a better opinion. The story is interesting, but I don't know if I'm compelled enough by it to do races over and over again. I'm also not sure why the archery is here. Maybe it's used to open doors via triggers or something like that, but if it's only used to shoot purple cubes, then in my opinion, it's just kind of a wasted mechanic. But I do hope that the dev continues to work on this. I will be watching its progress, and yeah, good luck to the dev. I think you've got something good going here, so please keep going with it. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to support the devs, be sure to wishlist their games. I will be putting their links in the description. And yeah, just hoping to get back more into video making in big 2026. I am also working on a game, so we'll see what happens with that. We'll see if I get it finished in the next year or two. We'll see. But yeah, thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!